we have got to put a defensive back on the list of top 10 most important balls. But I think you would agree with me, Caleb, that we don't know much about Tennessee's defensive backs because they overhauled the entire unit and practice was closed. But from everyone I talked to, Rickey Gibson III is most likely to be your premier cornerback, which Tennessee hasn't had since Alontae Taylor. How important is it for Rickey Gibson to be a solid, if not spectacular, player for Tennessee? He comes in at number 6 on our list.
Rickey Gibson is crucial for Tennessee this year. So let's break down Tennessee's situation in the secondary. By the way, shout out to Jalen McCullough. He inked the deal with the Los Angeles Rams. I'm really glad he got an NFL deal. I think the unfortunate legal case against him held him back his last couple of years by an overzealous Knoxville DA who just wants to make her name famous, so she unfairly indicts Tennessee football players who should never have been indicted for anything. There, that was my spiel for a second. But vote her out, guys. So the Rickey Gibson III is the one real key returning player for Tennessee in the secondary. He started to show promise towards the end of last year. I missed the boat. He and Jordan Matthews came in together. They were both really promising cornerbacks that could develop. I thought Matthews would be the star over Gibson. That turned out to not be the case. Rickey Gibson was the one who developed down the stretch. Josh Heupel has gone for more experience everywhere else.
You say you. I was on board with you. We both thought it would be Jordan Matthews.
Yes, that is true. And Josh Heupel ran so many people off, and he brought in experience. He brought in Jalen McMurray from Temple. He brought in Jermon McCoy from Oregon State. He brought in Jacoby Thomas from MTSU. I think all of these guys are going to be in the secondary starting this year. And he also added Boo Carter, who is a freshman phenom. But Rickey Gibson is the one returning player who showed promise last year and showed talent and who is probably going to start this year. Tennessee needs him to be a lockdown corner on one side of the ball. They haven't had a lockdown corner since Alontae Taylor, honestly. And if they could get one, that would change so much of the dynamic of what they do everywhere else. And Rickey Gibson III, I think, has the potential to be that, which is why he made my list of most important Vols. Because as you know, Dave, a lockdown corner totally changes how you can scheme your defense, doesn't it?
Oh, listen, people say that the Dallas Cowboys didn't need Deion Sanders to win that third Super Bowl. They had to have him. Jimmy Holmes and I, who's brought to you by Varner Ford, have argued about this. It changes the way your entire defense can play football. And I think that if you have a lockdown corner, which is difficult now, I don't know that there are many great lockdown corners like there used to be with Rivas and Deion and some of those other guys that I could go on and on and on about because of the rules of the game. But you still want the best of the best. And I will tell you this, too. We may differ a little bit, but I'm okay if Rickey Gibson is a little bit of a gambler. Because I think nowadays where more points are scored, you want a guy. You and I may differ on this, that gambles a little bit, which means he's going to give up some on the offensive side. And I know I'm thinking of a Dallas Cowboys cornerback, for instance, but you may not be. Do you think he needs to be a gambler, or do you think he needs to be just a consistent presence?
I actually agree with you. I wouldn't agree with you if he was playing for Iowa when you can't score at all. But I actually do think for Tennessee, yeah, it's worth gambling. It's worth gambling because that's probably your best chance of getting a stop. I mean, guys, people forget this, but an interception is kind of a big part of an interception is a big thing in football. Okay, that really changes the complexity of the game. So yeah, no, I'm fine with the gambling. Particularly, Jacoby Thomas is an experienced safety. If you put him behind Gibson, then I think you could have a little bit of help there. But yeah, no, I don't really see a problem with gambling. Now, I think given the way Tennessee runs its system, there's going to be a lot of scoring and a lot of offense. So I actually think that it's okay to bite in certain situations and bait in certain situations. And so, no, I'm with you with Rickey Gibson being a gambler. Totally. I think that's actually kind of the value that you want out of your cornerbacks playing for Tennessee.
Now, innately, though, let me ask you this. Does Tennessee because they're so aggressive with the front seven, do they have to be a little bit less aggressive in the back end because they have to protect themselves? Because you're asking them to guard people for a long time if the pass rush doesn't get there. So do you need to be conservative on the back end if you're aggressive on the front? Brought to you by Don Self. State Farm, customer service still matters. For over 40 years, they have built their business on taking care of their customers. Go to donself.net, donself.net, 423-396-2126, 423-396-2126. Customer service still matters, donself.net. So I believe you need to be aggressive throughout. Now, that could get me down 21-0 in the first quarter, and I don't want to do that. But I would like to be aggressive and gamble throughout. We're not talking about across the board, Caleb. There are going to be certain coverages where you're going to play soft and off. But I think your all 11 need to be aggressive.
I don't think you have to play fully aggressive with all 11 if I want Rickey Gibson to be the gambler. I think you're going to be able to play soft coverage and have gambling cornerbacks because, look, the point of Tennessee's system is to get a lead and force into obvious passing downs. Well, if you force them into obvious passing downs, they're going to mostly run their dime packages, aren't they? They may not even run their nickel packages at that point. So you're going to have 6 DBs out there. You can have your cornerbacks gamble at that point. You got 4 other DBs. So I actually think that's where you could go with this. And you got James Pierce getting the pressure all the time. What you're talking about is the question I guess you asked is should you play a little softer with all the stunts and pressure practices you have for the front seven? That was the John Chavis philosophy, wasn't it? Play a soft zone coverage and just bring pressure after pressure after pressure with the front four or with the front seven.
They played a lot of man. They played a lot of man. But I think they would play soft man at times. But they played a whole lot of man. That was the whole dropping over your shoulder because you're looking at the receiver and not the ball. Do you remember that criticism used to come up with Tennessee's defensive backs under Larry Slade in the late 90s? Well, the reason was if you don't look at your man's going to run away from you. So, yeah. I mean, they played quite a bit of man, but they played some soft man.
Yeah. Yeah, it drove people crazy that they played so much soft man during that time. I remember that. I think you're going to be able to run a lot of, because your defensive line is so good, I think you'll be able to play a lot more soft coverage this year. And really, I mean, you can drop your linebackers into soft coverage a good bit too. But I think most of the time, Keenan Peely may be the only linebacker that's out on the field, which we'll get to him as an important player in the future. But this is where you can allow your cornerbacks to be playmakers, particularly Gibson, who is an athlete.
Okay, don't give anything away, but are there any other underclassmen on the list that you want to tease? The show represented by Banks and Jones, because Rickey's just been here for what, about 18 months? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. So as we count down the 10 most important balls, Rickey Gibson comes in at number 6. Is there another underclassman on the list? Don't give it away.
I mean, there's a very obvious underclassman if you're talking about people who are freshmen and sophomores. Kind of a really, really, really obvious one, guys. Go ahead and guess who that is.
Does he like to throw the ball a lot?
He likes to throw the ball. He likes to get
Does he play volleyball at all?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, very.
Will he be number 1? We'll see. You'll have to keep tuning in day to day as we count them down. Yeah, that's right. So where are we to this point in the countdown of the top 10 most important balls headed into summer workouts? Give us a countdown.
Halfway through, we had Javonte Spraggins, John Campbell Jr., Amari Thomas, Brew McCoy, and now we have had Rickey Gibson III. Yeah. We love those trenches, don't we? Started with those linemen.
We do. We're kind of simple like that.
And guys, by the way, by the time the season starts, Dave will stop saying Amari Hand. I can promise you. He'll stop living in 2002. Again? No,
Oh,
I'm calling him out. He accidentally said it in our phone call this morning, guys. Dave
3:45
accidentally said
a.m.
it while
production meeting. Dylan says, go ahead and say boo Carter, Caleb. We know you want to. Okay, Dylan, I'm going to give you a little hint or a little insight. Carter didn't go on the list because as much as I think he'll be a starter, I don't think he's, air quotes, important this year to be a starter. I think he's either good enough where he becomes a starter and then you're happy with that. It's hard for a freshman to make these lists for me. Or I think somebody else steps in that position as a placeholder till he's ready. That's why I didn't have him on the list. Does that make sense?
Yes, and let me give you guys a perfect example. The 2007 Tennessee team, the one that won the East that would have won the SEC title if they didn't make the most predictable throw on a curl route of all time that LSU jumped to win.
Yes.
That team did have Eric Berry, and he was a freshman All-American. But Dave, Eric Berry wasn't nearly as important as Gerard Mayo to that team, or as Rico McCoy to that team, or as Dan Williams to that team. Those were all three more important defenders than Eric Berry on that team, weren't they?
No.
And then on the offensive side,
I'm gonna roll with you there. I think Eric Berry was the guy that offensive coordinator's worried about. He started like his second game, didn't he?
He should have started his first, but that's a different story. But no, I still think I think the front four with Dan Williams and Robert Ayers was a bigger deal. And I think Gerard Mayo was the most important player on that team defensively. And then offensively, you had Eric Ainge and Brad Cottom when he came back healthy to the end, had the best second half of the season I think I've ever seen a tight end had. If Brad Cottom had played the whole year, he probably would have set every tight end record beyond Jason Witten. And then, you had Lucas Taylor standing out. Whatever you want to think about him, Arian Foster was very important to that team in 2007. I mean, there were guys that were more important than Eric Berry. And he would not have made your top 10 list going into the year.
There wasn't anybody except for the quarterback. He would have been number 2 to the quarterback.
You would not have put him number 2 on your list going into the year.
Wait, was that his freshman year or sophomore?
I'm talking about his freshman year. Yeah.
Oh, well, I might have done like an honorable mention or had him at number 10 because I did think that's the last guy. It's funny you bring that up, that I'm like, is a sure bet. Because Nico, I believe, if anybody watches the show, please hit like and subscribe now. I'm telling you that I believe in Nico 110%. That was the last guy, Eric Berry, that I believed. And it's funny you bring his name up, that I believed in as much as I do Nico Maleaba.
And that's curiously, was that
a compliment,
did you think that when Tennessee landed Eric Berry, or was that when you were covering the practices at the time? Was it based on what you saw him doing in practice?
No, I went down to Atlanta with Fred White. We kind of broke him down. I thought he was going to be really good. I thought he could easily play quarterback at a lower level if you wanted him to. Now, you got to run a lot. I mean, we didn't have the best arm. He's just one of the greatest athletes and greatest men that I've ever been around.